Hi, welcome to the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. In today's video, we're going to go over an old school technique used by people like Preemo, Pete Rock, Madlib, Dilla, People Under the Stairs, A Tribe Called Quest, etc, etc. It helps you bring out the bass in your samples and gives you more control over the frequency ranges during mixdown. It's not a particularly difficult technique, but it's era defining and it's still a go-to for producers and beat makers today. I'm not going to go over the history too much because there's a ton of information online, but what I am going to do is go through the technique, through the concept, and show you how to set it up in the MPC. Let's jump in. Now, whilst this is a technique and sound that we're all familiar with now, I want to go back to 1994, which is round about the time when I first started using the technique. Back then we didn't have YouTube, obviously, and a lot of producers and beat makers came across the same kind of techniques purely by chance, sometimes by word of mouth, and more often than not it was because we needed to work out some kind of workaround on our MPC or our SP1200s. For me, it was a workaround on the MPC 3000. I was making a lot of sample-based music at the time, and what I was finding was I would take a sample, and obviously this sample is a full song, mastered, mixed, and I didn't really have the control that I wanted to over the bass, the highs, the mids, etc. And when I was compressing, the compressor that I was using I'd lose a lot of low end, and very few studios had multi-band compressors. Only like the top studios had multi-band compressors, and so I needed a way to be able to have control over the bass in the sample, but also have control over compressing and EQing the mids and the highs. So the workaround that I found, that I came to basically in the end, was to have two versions of the same program. And I would have a bass version and I would have a mids and highs version. And that way it would give me the control that I needed. I would be able to just EQ the bass, and I would be able to EQ and compress the mids and the highs. At the time, I honestly wasn't trying to create a sound or anything. It was purely for mixing purposes. It was purely just to give me control. But then I started hearing people like Pete Rock use it in their productions, and Q-Tip, and a lot of house music producers were using it at the time as well. Kenny Dope, DJ Sneak was using it a lot, Todd Terry, and they were using it creatively in their arrangements. And, you know, it just kind of picked up from there, really. So the way that I used to do it in the MPC 3000 was I would copy the program, so I'd have two different versions, and I would use the low-pass filter in the MPC 3000, which was a 12 decibels, two-pole low-pass filter, I think, very, very basic. And I would roll off all the highs to get just the low end and the bass sound, and then I would, with the mids and highs version of the program, I would be able to compress and mix that on my mixing desk. Now in the new generation of MPCs, it's a lot easier to do, and you have a lot more control over it, and you can go a lot more in depth. So I just quickly knocked up something this morning just to kind of illustrate how to set this technique up in your MPC. It's just a beat which I programmed, which I've taken from my Crates Motel beats, which is available on Bandcamp, and I've laid a sample over the top. I've purposely chosen a sample that has quite a lot of bass in it so I can really show you the technique. I'll just play it quickly. So the way that I do it in the new MPC, and there are different ways to do it, but this is just one of the ways that I do it. I had my first loop, which was, I'll just solo this. So that's my main sample with the hook and the bass. What I did was I duplicated the program. So in my drum program, I open this up and I hit duplicate. I then renamed that program Poo Poo Loop Bass, and I put it onto track 3. In sequence, in the copy here, I copied events, went in here, track 1, copy all events, bar 1 to 3, and I copied it onto track 3, which was the Poo Poo Loop Bass. So now Hopefully you can hear that in your headphones or in your sound system. And so you can see I've got two separate programs, one with the highs and the mids and one with the bass. Then you need to do the separate processing on the channel. So we'll start with the bass actually. Let's go into the bass. So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Quick and easy way is to use Kill EQ and take this out and maybe take that down a little bit lower to maybe 139. I'll go into why I prefer not to use Air Kill EQ later on. So that is one of the techniques that you can use. Me personally, I use Air Filter. Now the way that I've got this set up is pretty similar to how my MPC 3000 filter was. I've actually got my own preset here which I made myself. It's the LP2, which is a 2-pole low-pass filter. Resonance on about 0.7 is pretty close to how an MPC 3000 filter is. I've taken the cutoff frequency all the way down to 135 Hertz, so I've just isolating the bass. Let's just put that in solo. Yep. And then I added a very, very subtle amount of resample, which you can change in here. You have several different things you can change it to. With resample, I mean literally 0.1, if you listen to the difference, you can hear a little bit of sort of grittiness in there. I'll take it out. So it's super subtle, but it just adds that kind of 12-bit lo-fi kind of old school sound. Very, very subtle, as I said, but for me that is closer to how I remember my MPC 3000 sounding. Not exactly how it sounded. I'm not even going to get into the comparison type thing, but I like the way that this sounds. I like it having set up like this. So that's how I have the bass set up. I've then done a little bit of EQ work. Obviously these settings are not going to carry through on every single sample. You need to use your ears, but basically what I've really done is just boosted the low end with a bell around about 96 Hertz because I'm aiming for the bass sound in the sample. I'm not looking at the kick sound, which is probably a lower fundamental, probably around about 60 Hertz. So I've gone in on a not super narrow Q, but kind of narrower Q than normal, and I've just done 96 Hertz. And that's just boosted the bass a little bit. And then, if you watch my videos, you know that I always do this. I put MPC 60 at the end. Does it sound like an MPC 60? As I've also said in other videos, I don't care, but I like the way that it sounds. So that is how I have the bass set up. Pretty easy. Literally the filter, a bit of EQ, and then you can miss off the MPC 60 or you can have it on there. But the MPC 60 I find just adds a little bit of girth and a little bit of weight in the low end, which I really, really like. It has a nice tight sound to it. Now what I also did in drum effects, which is the last page, if you go into program edit, go right to the end and hit it twice. On each different pad, I've added a bit of bass wide, 3.07, so not loads, but it really does give, and I've also done another video about this on drum effects, it gives such a nice kind of warm low end, which I don't find any of the EQs or anything else on the MPC does. But this bass wide setting just gives this really nice round kind of warm low end. So that is how the bass is set up. So now let's go into the mids and highs program. So obviously what I need to do here is I need to get rid of the low end. So I've used Air Filter again. This time it's a high pass filter, the HP2. A little bit of resample again. Resonance around about 1. And I've taken it up to 226, which basically means you're going to get rid of the low end. That will completely depend on the sample. You need to use your ears. What you're effectively doing is creating a crossover point. So you've got one program which is the low end, and then you've got a crossover point. Now they don't have to be the same. You don't have to think, have I got the low pass filter set at 135 Hertz? Do I have to therefore have 130 Hertz or so on the cutoff frequency on the high ends? No, you don't have to have it exactly the same. You can leave a little bit of a gap. The reason why I've left a little bit of a gap in this case is because you get a lot of mud build up in that kind of area between kind of 180 and 220, 230, 240. So I've actually helped myself out there and kind of cleaned the sample up a little bit as well by isolating the bass, isolating the highs and mids, and leaving a little bit of a gap. Also, I used my ears because I'm not exactly sure how the slopes work on the MPC because I don't have any visual reference and it doesn't really explain anywhere what the slopes are. So by using my ears, there doesn't seem to be any phasing issues, and it seems to sound it sounds good. And if it sounds good, then it is good. I've done a bit of EQ after the filter. Literally just adding a bit of clarity at about 3K and a little bit of a high shelf at 6, just to clean the sample up. Very, very subtle. I've then done a bit of bus compression, pretty similar settings to what I would have on, say, an SSL, just really not a high ratio, an attack letting things through because I don't want it to sound too squashed. Not a super fast release, but quite fast release. And then I've kind of squashed it a little bit because I kind of want that kind of SP303 kind of vinyl compression sound to the sample as well. And I find that the bus compressor gets pretty close to that. Not exactly the same, but pretty close. Then finished with the MPC 60. And that pretty much is it, to be honest. One thing I did want to explain, why do I use the filter rather than kill EQ? To be honest, firstly, in kill EQ, I don't feel I have as much control over what I'm killing in the low ends or the high ends. It does kind of do a better job because it's completely killing frequency areas, but I don't like not being able to get in there and adjust the areas that I'm killing. But also, most importantly, and especially for that old school sound, resonance on your filters. What you're basically doing with a resonance on a filter is you're kind of boosting the cutoff point on your filter, almost creating a little bit of a bump. And a lot of the old school filters on the SP1200, 3000, 4000, 2000, etc., by adjusting the resonance, you could bring out where the cutoff frequency was. So I'm going to push it further than I have done it. Obviously at the moment it's 0.7 because that's kind of round about where 3000, it sounds good to me, was. But I'll show you what you can do if you use a resonance filter, which you can't do if you're using the kill EQ in the same way. Now obviously that's distorting slightly, but my point is you're creating a little bit of a bump where the filter cutoff is, and you know, if you know anything about filters on synthesizers, etc., resonance can really kind of focus in on it, and you can get some really, really nice sounds. And also when you change the cutoff frequency, if you automate doing it and you have resonance on, you can get some really, really nice kind of sounds as well. So that's why I prefer using the air filter rather than the kill EQ. But there's nothing wrong with using the kill EQ. It's a quick and easy way of doing it, and you know, to follow it up with a bit of EQ as well to like boost the low end, absolutely no reason why you can't do that. So when you have it set up like this, it gives you the ability to, this is a classic thing, you'll know this on a ton of hip hop tracks. So there you have it. Really, really simple technique, but era defining. And you know, if you're into your boom bap, also if you're into your house music, well, actually multiple genres use that technique. And like I said, you know, for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me it was not a creative thing at all. I wasn't trying to create a sound to make a statement or anything like that, and I wasn't using it really in my arrangements. It was literally for me a way to have more control in mixdowns. Hats off to people like Pete Rock and Q-Tip and etc., who kind of, you know, helped define that sound in boom bap, hip hop, etc. And you know, we all know it now and we all use it now. From a mixing point of view, bear in mind, and I've done a video about this actually, bear in mind that kind of what you're doing when you separate samples or sounds into different regions is you're creating a multi-band effect, something that doesn't exist in the MPC. But as always, there's a workaround in the MPC. So by doing this, there's no reason why you can't have 3 different programs that are duplicated, one for the low end, one for the mids, and one for the highs. That would work really well if your sample's got some vocals in it. In the mid-range, you can isolate the vocals and you can work on those, and you could filter and mess around with those. You could leave your highs and you could have them in stereo and pan them wide, so you've got lots of side information in the highs. Keep the mid-range kind of central where the vocals are, and then obviously mono the bass. So by splitting it into different programs like this, it's not just a boom bap thing. It's not just a way of creating a vibe that we all know and love. It's also a way of getting absolute control over your mixing, and and you open the door to a whole new wave list of different creative things that you can do once you've got control over those frequency ranges. So thank you for watching. I was really excited about doing that video, to be honest, because I love that sound and it's something that I've wanted to do a video on for a while. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more mixing, mastering and MPC tutorials and reviews. This is the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.